My belief is that manufacturing is a decade transformative change. For example, the China story just didn't happen 5, 6 years back. I think it's a 40-year story about building a manufacturing hub. If you look
Hey everyone, I'm Sudhir Mulchandani from Brew Wealth. In today's interview, we'll talk about the manufacturing space in our country with Mr. Gop Kumar, who's the MD and CEO of Access Mutual Fund. Welcome, Mr. Gop Kumar.
thanks, Sudhir. Nice catching up with you.
Same
Looking
here,
forward
sir.
for a good conversation today.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is a pleasure to have you on our channel. So to begin with the goal of achieving a 5 trillion economy in the next few years, do you believe that manufacturing sector has a big role to play, or in that sense, any role to play?
I think the way I want you to think about is that India surely will be a 5 trillion economy. If you really look at the way by 2027, the way the plans are set up, I think very important you to look at three components the way we started post-independence period. Okay, you had a long period of license raj in this country, which was driven by 5-year plans. And you've seen the birth of large PSUs, heavy industries that point of time. I don't know whether we can recollect that point of time. Then the situation came in when there was a globalization happened in 1990s. I think one of the comments I made on the recent conversation is that India got independence of 1947. It was a political independence. What we got, the financial independence, is 1990s. I think that's a true thing. What impacted every citizens of this country. I think that's the thing. What happened recently is that the transformation changed into a large transformation of focusing on manufacturing. India in between was service-led economy for a long period of time. So if you really look at today, pre-pandemic numbers into manufacturing, it contributes almost 16 to 17% of the GDP today. And if you really look at which are the components of this GDP, what is driving this economy are broadly IT, manufacturing, healthcare, renewable, agriculture, and banking services. I think these are 5 or 6 segments which actually driven this vital economy. We do believe the manufacturing can play a large lead role. If you look at the amount of money coming on FDIs on various manufacturing, because manufacturing gives you a most diversified portfolio, more diversified. Even though it's very thematic in terms of investment, but manufacturing as a theme, it's actually used very long period of time. If you look at what happened in Japan, Germany, these were all manufacturing economies. And traditionally, if you look at manufacturing economies, did extremely well than the service-led economies. I think my belief is that manufacturing will play a very, very important role in building a 5 trillion economy by 2027.
Great. And since you spoke that from 1991, especially when Mr. Manmohan Singh ji came in and he actually privatized and a lot of global companies came in, what do you think is the future? Do you think this will continue from here, or you will also see a lot of make in India companies, which the present government is focusing on a lot? Do you think any change which will happen in the manufacturing sector going forward?
Yeah, I think the reform actually started in 2014 in terms of way we are putting a path in terms of manufacturing. If you look at programs like Make in India, PLI schemes, if you look at Atmanirbhar programs, there are 5 or 6 large programs which the government runs, which are very, very clearly focused on setting up indigenization in terms of manufacturing. It is just not trying to indigenize the local products, but I think it brings a lot of premiumization. I think very, very clearly that products are bringing. If you really look at yesterday's article, the Foxconn, one point of time said that India's iPhone base will be larger than China. This was yesterday's comment on New York Times. I think my belief is that our journey has started. 2014 journey has started. If you really look at from manufacturing side, it takes time for setting up a plant. There are huge investments. Capex happens. I think the whole idea about manufacturing is also not just looking at India as a consumption hub. It also looking at what are the net exports we are trying to do. My belief, I think we're in right track in terms of putting up these programs in place. And already we've seen a lot of green shoots across, whether it's defense, consumer products, electronic setups, automotive components. And India is a large exporters. I think most people are not even aware that India global manufacturers. I think that hub has happened. I think my belief is driven by two or three things. I think we also had a corporate tax cut, so it became our concession rate is almost 17%, which is much cheaper compared to most of the developing economies, and there is obviously labor cost arbitrage. I think this also helps us to make sure that we are globally competitive in terms of what exports we try to do, and especially the products what we manufacture. I think we're in the right opportunity today. I think we crossed our lessons, Raj. We crossed our globalization. I think we are in a large transformative period of India has never witnessed. My belief is the manufacturing story will last for a pretty long period of time compared to what we're trying to look at services, because services are always arbitrage in terms of uh, people cost and time value. I always say that services are always there, but manufacturing takes for other economics to take time to build these capacities, and it is there to long stay. And there are examples. Maybe Japan and Germany is a clinical example. China obviously is a great example.
Right. So although we are convinced that manufacturing story is here to last, but usually sectoral funds are often considered riskier than the your large cap, mid cap, or a multi cap fund. So what's your message to investors who are considering to invest in manufacturing space?
So I agree it is a thematic fund, but it is not largely sectoral in that sense, because it invests in 11 categories, 65 sectors, 11 sectors and 65 categories. It is highly diversified in that nature, in the sense that I think a lot of people will think about saying that there were funds like infrastructure funds came into play, where the focus was putting money on infrastructure. I think that continues to play a larger game, but compared to manufacturing is largely thematic but highly diversified in terms of number of sectors what we're looking at. Uh, Interestingly, a lot of people ask me why is this thematic is different, and when you compare it with our own index. Just want to give an example. For example, somebody wants to take an exposure in a large cap, for example, and if you look at Nifty as an index today, if you look at the weightage of automotive and automotive components in Nifty 50 is hardly 3.5%. But if you are to look at the index, what we are looking at, which is your manufacturing index, the the weightage is almost 11.5%. So if you really want to take an exposure on manufacturing, thematic works pretty well in terms of diversified, through a diversified nature. It's not
Correct.
talking about. So if you look at most of the large caps today are pegged against Nifty 50, right? If you look at indexes, so if you look at a lot of sectors, manufacturing as a theme can do much better than your normal themes, which are sectorial in nature. For example, infrastructure is one of the examples which we gave. We also had pharma funds. There's a banking funds which came into play, right? But my belief is that this is a longer story. Manufacturing is larger story, longer story to be here. And if you look at the index formation also, it's very, very competitive in that sense, that it has large focus on core companies. Like if you look at, when I said 11.5%, automobile and automobile related companies are 11.5% weightage in that index.
In a landscape with various diversifying funds,
Yeah.
how will Access Manufacturing Fund stand out, and how is it any different from the Business Cycle Fund and Special Situation Fund of Access Mutual Funds?
Business cycle fund and they are quite different in that in terms of the way we build portfolios. Business cycle fund obviously is also a longer term portfolios where we look at companies at the very nascent stage, work along. And if you look at our business cycle fund, which is 7-8 months old now, done pretty well. It's in first quartile performance. So it is quite different than what we're looking at, because if you look at our index, the index is manufacturing index is quite different than what business cycle index is all about. Special situation is also a completely different fund where we look at special situations in that sense, but it is maybe much more flexible in that sense. But manufacturing fund is very, very clear that if our investors wants to look at from a long period of time, at least from a 3 to 5 years perspective, I think the story is there. I think there are stocks which we will able to pick up for the investors and build a good portfolio for investors. And my urge is that we just look at the indexes, what we're trying to build on. which is a benchmark index, and our ability is to make sure that we outbid this fund for the benchmark. I think we are pretty confident that the way we are building up and looking at a bottom-up stories, I think we are there in terms of identifying right stocks in the portfolio. Will be a fairly diversified portfolio compared to a very, very thematic focused portfolios. So we have 11 sectors. So it's a pretty large sectors to work on. We're looking at investments where companies which are focusing on capex, obviously building right products. So we have seen that last 5 or 6 years, that amount of FDIs has come on building capex in the manufacturing side. Pretty unheard about it. If you look at 2022, 22, we had $19 million. Today, if you look at, we are already at 12 million. I think that's the first of itself is we have got that. We're also looking at consumptions, but we are not just looking at companies which build normal products. We believe that the consumption story is based on premiumization. Third one, we are looking at larger thing as the net exports. I think huge opportunity for India to look at, because there is we had to build a case on China plus narrative. I think that narrative works pretty well in picking up the stocks for us. So there's larger 3 themes we are working on in terms of how do you want to pick up a bottom-up stock portfolio here.
So talking about China, China was obviously one of the largest manufacturing sector. But
Yes.
2 things which I think that stopped the manufacturing growth. One is the population, and second is the rising labor cost. So how long do you foresee the manufacturing theme thriving in India, considering the potential rise in the labor cost in India as well? What is the long-term outlook on this particular space?
See, it's a very interesting question. I think my belief is that manufacturing is a decade transformative change. For example, the China story just didn't happen 5-6 years back. I think it's a 40-year story about building a manufacturing hub. If you look at manufacturing, is just not manufacturing, but manufacturing at a scale is very important. I think the ability of China to build that was very, very interesting. Whether it is precision tools to high-end manufacturing capabilities, I think they've done it well. Obviously, there will be tailwinds in terms of when we build large manufacturing, when you're on a 40-year advantage, right? India has a fairly good advantage in terms of cost of goods landing. So there is a calculation called cost of goods landing. Today, India is around 85%. It came because India also took a call on concessional rate of corporate tax. Corporate tax is at 17% today. And plus your labor cost is much cheaper. Right. India comes to the situation where our labor cost is much more stable. There are a fair amount of labor reforms is in place today. My belief is India's story of manufacturing is a multi-decade. It's just not specific to a particular year or the particular dispensation of the political party today. I think my belief is that the structural change what India took is immaterial about what's happening in terms of our political dispensation in this country today. I think most of people ask the same question, that this political dispensation brought 5 or 6 large reforms around manufacturing. Do you think that this will continue? I think my belief is that the way last 10, if you talk about 12 years or 13 years, what has happened in the country, it's a structural change. It is a structural change what happened in the country. India has become more aspirational. I think that's where the changes are coming in. And once these schemes are in play, I think it's very difficult for a new government, or if the new government doesn't come in, or if there is a change of thought, the government finds very difficult for us to change where we are today. I think there is huge amount of incentives which is laid out, especially PLI schemes, which are very, very interesting today. I think my belief is that it's a decade change what's happening in the country.
So even if, let's say, there is a change in the government at the central level, the manufacturing theme will not be affected at that level?
Never. So if you look at, let's look at 90s, where there are 2 things which has happened in 90s. One was you had a large amount of labor arbitrage, people arbitrage. So you found IT services, BPOs and KPOs did extremely well that point of time. And you also had textiles. In the country, we had set up a large garment manufacturing outlet. But ultimately, some point of time that labor arbitrage went off, right? And there were large issues. So my point I'm trying to drive here is that what is important is just not the labor cost. The labor cost is one of the arbitrage, but it's also about building a right environment for the manufacturing setup to be in India. Look at why did in 1947 to 1990, why did India didn't do well? Even though India was focused on setting up heavy industries, right? It was driven through PSUs, and you had a huge amount of license raj in the country where licenses were not given free. I think my point I'm trying to drive is this is not a labor cost, which is a driving and driving the manufacturing as a sector. I think what's driving is the structural change, what's happened in the country today. I think that is a very defining moment for the country today. I think it will remain longer. I think our belief is that if you're able to catch the team, able to build the catch hold of, if you're able to identify the stocks, able to build portfolios, we are pretty clear that we are here to create wealth for our investors. I think very, very clear on what we want to drive the whole theme of manufacturing.
Right. So that's a pretty positive thing that you've said about the manufacturing scheme. And thank you for being with us today, Gop sir. It was lovely to have you on the show.
Thanks, Subir. I think I enjoyed your conversation and looking
Thank
forward
you.
to a couple of more when we have time on different topics.
Absolutely. It will be our pleasure to have you back on the show.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thank you.